Greetings, friends. Please unwind, feel comfortable, and drift into the paradoxes of thought with me. Get ready to challenge your assumptions while exploring unraveling philosophy and psychology. Is it better to be loved or to be feared? This is the question that begins our journey. A question that has echoed for centuries. A question that seems simple at first, but grows heavier the longer we sit with it. Pause for a moment and reflect. If you were in a position of power, which would you choose? Love, with all its warmth and loyalty, or fear, with all its force and reliability? Niccolò Machiavelli forces us to face this dilemma without comfort. He does not allow us to hide behind ideals. He does not let us escape into fantasy. He pushes us to stare directly at the mechanics of power in all their beauty, in all their brutality. Who was Machiavelli? To many, he is a sinister name, a whisper in political history. To others, he is a genius, a man who saw the truth of politics more clearly than anyone before him. He was born in Florence in 1469, a city of art, ambition, and endless intrigue. He lived through wars, shifting alliances, and the fall of powerful families. For a time, he served as a diplomat, moving between the courts of kings and popes. He saw power up close. He studied how men rose and how they fell. But Machiavelli's life was not one of endless triumph. When the Medici family returned to power in Florence, he was cast out. He was accused of conspiracy, imprisoned, even tortured. When he was finally released, he was forced into exile. His career seemed broken, his influence gone. Yet it was in that exile, stripped of privilege and honor, that he wrote his most famous work, The Prince. Many read The Prince as a manual for tyranny, a book that teaches rulers how to deceive, manipulate, and control. Others see it as satire, perhaps a veiled attack on the very leaders it appears to praise. Some read it as a desperate plea from a man trying to win back his position. Whatever the case, it remains one of the most controversial books ever written. It is both admired and despised. It is quoted and condemned. And it is still alive in political thought today. But tonight, we are not here to simply read The Prince as a historical artifact. We are here to open Machiavelli's entire playbook, to move through his writings, his ideas, his warnings, to understand not only what he wrote, but why his words still matter. Machiavelli does not give us a clean theory of government. He does not build grand systems like Plato. He does not argue for natural law like Aristotle. Instead, he studies the battlefield of politics as it really is. He watches men seize power, and he asks why some succeed while others fail. He pulls apart the myths that rulers tell, and he exposes the machinery beneath. This is why he unsettles us. He reminds us that behind every ideal of justice, there is calculation. Behind every display of mercy, there is strategy. Behind every speech about unity or faith, there is ambition. Machiavelli is not interested in how things should be. He is interested in how they actually are. And so this lecture is not simply a reading of old texts. It is an exploration of strategies that remain alive in politics, in business, in leadership, and in human behavior. Each section we will examine reveals another tool in Machiavelli's power playbook, Some tools are violent, some are subtle. Some seem obvious, while others shock us with their coldness. Together, they form a portrait of power that is as fascinating as it is unsettling. We begin with questions, and we will not always end with answers. Because Machiavelli does not comfort us with certainty. He offers instead a mirror that reflects the ambition, the fear, the cunning, and the cruelty that drive human affairs. Over the course of this exploration, we will see how Machiavelli redefined ideas like virtue, fortune, loyalty, and cruelty. We will examine his metaphors of the lion and the fox, his warnings about mercenaries and corruption, his reflections on republics and monarchies, and his relentless insistence that power must be maintained through action, not through hope. Be prepared for ideas that may disturb you. Be prepared for truths that may feel uncomfortably close to the world you see today. And be prepared to find yourself returning again and again to that first question. Is it better to be loved or to be feared? Because by the time we have moved through Machiavelli's playbook, that question will not feel simple anymore. It will feel like the key that unlocks every struggle for power, from the courts of Renaissance Italy to the halls of modern governments, corporations, and even our own relationships. Let us begin. When we think of politics, we often imagine it wrapped in ideals. We picture justice, fairness, or virtue as the guiding lights of rulers. From Plato to Augustine, philosophers before Machiavelli told us that politics should aim at the highest good. They taught that leaders must embody wisdom, courage, and morality. They drew images of republics ruled by reason, kingdoms guided by divine law, and communities built upon virtue. Machiavelli cuts through these illusions with a single stroke. He says, in effect, that politics is not about what should be. It is about what is. The ideals may look beautiful, but they are fragile masks. Behind them lies the raw struggle for survival, dominance, and control. In The Prince, Machiavelli writes that a ruler who tries to live up to ideals will be ruined among men who are not ideal. He insists that leaders must be prepared to act against faith, against charity, against humanity, even against religion, if that is what their survival requires. This is not because he rejects morality outright. It is because he believes that morality alone cannot withstand the forces of fortune, ambition, and conflict. This view shocked his contemporaries. They had been taught that rulers must serve God and justice first. Yet Machiavelli observed rulers who acted in pious ways often lost their states. Meanwhile, those who betrayed promises, deceived rivals, and used cruelty effectively survived and thrived. He concluded that power abates its own laws. To ignore those laws is to invite collapse. We must understand the context of his time to appreciate the force of his argument. Florence and the Italian peninsula were not peaceful lands. They were fractured into city-states, each with its own ambitions. The French invaded, the Spanish interfered, and the papacy itself played politics like a prince. Alliances shifted weekly, armies burned towns, families rose and fell in sudden turns of fortune. In this setting, a ruler who clung to ideals without flexibility was not admired. He was destroyed. Machiavelli observed that men judge more by appearances than by reality. People will believe a ruler is good if he appears to act morally, even if he is ruthless behind the scenes. This creates a tension. The illusion of morality can be useful, even necessary. But the pursuit of morality itself, without calculation, can be fatal. Here we see the first layer of Machiavelli's power playbook. Do not confuse appearance with reality. Appearances must be carefully managed, but the reality of decision-making must remain grounded in necessity. If mercy preserves stability, then mercy is chosen. If cruelty is required, then cruelty must be applied. What matters is not whether an act is good or evil in the abstract, but whether it secures the state and preserves authority. This raises uncomfortable questions. Are moral systems then only tools of control if rulers pretend to be just, kind, or faithful while acting with cunning? Is morality anything more than theater? Machiavelli does not answer directly. Instead, he turns the question back to us. Do we prefer a ruler who clings to ideals and loses the kingdom, or a ruler who bends morality and keeps the kingdom alive? He points to history for answers. Consider the Roman Republic, which he admired in his discourses on Livy. Rome expanded, not by living as a model of peace and charity, but through discipline, cunning, and often harsh measures. Its leaders pretended to honor traditions and gods, but behind that veil they made ruthless decisions for survival. Machiavelli's lesson is clear. Stability requires more than ideals. It requires cold, practical calculation. Let us pause and reflect. Imagine two leaders facing the same crisis. One refuses to break his promises because he believes in absolute honesty. The other breaks his word when it serves his interest. Who survives? Machiavelli would say the second. Why? Because men are fickle, promises are fragile, and power rests on force and cunning more than on trust. This does not mean Machiavelli denies all value in morality. He sees its utility. He urges rulers to appear merciful, faithful, and upright. He insists that people must see their leader as virtuous. Yet he separates this appearance from reality. A wise ruler is skilled in performance. He puts on the mask of virtue while keeping the hands of strategy free. This duality between appearance and reality is one of Machiavelli's most unsettling contributions to philosophy. It strips away comforting illusions. It tells us that rulers succeed not because they are moral, but because they understand when to use morality and when to discard it. Think again of Plato. In the Republic, Plato describes the philosopher king as one who rules with wisdom and justice, guided by eternal truth. Machiavelli turns this image upside down. For him, the successful ruler is not the philosopher who contemplates ideals. It is the strategist who adapts, deceives, and seizes opportunity. Where Plato sought harmony between justice and power, Machiavelli separates them. The contrast extends further. Christian thinkers taught that rulers must be shepherds of their people, accountable to divine law. Machiavelli does not dismiss religion entirely, but he treats it as another instrument. A ruler may use religion to inspire loyalty or to justify decisions, but he must never allow religious ideals to dictate choices that threaten survival. Here again, the reality of power trumps the illusion of morality. What does this mean for us? It means that when we look at history, we should ask whether the actions of rulers were driven by ideals, or whether ideals were used as masks for pragmatic calculation. It also means that when we look at our own time, we must ask whether the values leaders display are genuine, or whether they are carefully chosen illusions. Machiavelli offers no comfort in these questions. He offers only clarity. He tells us that power, stripped of illusions, is not gentle. It is harsh, competitive, and endlessly unstable. If rulers refuse to face this reality, their states collapse. If rulers embrace it too openly, they risk hatred and rebellion. The art lies in walking the fine line between appearance and necessity. As we move deeper into Machiavelli's playbook, we must hold on to this tension. The illusions of morality are powerful, but the reality of power cannot be ignored. In his writings, Machiavelli shows us again and again how rulers who fail to balance these forces are destroyed. Some cling too tightly to virtue and fall to cunning enemies. Others display cruelty without restraint and provoke hatred. The survivors are those who master the balance, who act without hesitation, yet who know how to clothe their actions in the garments of morality. This is why Machiavelli's work endures. It is not a celebration of evil, but a study of necessity. He strips away the comforting myths of political philosophy and forces us to confront the engine that drives human affairs. And once we see it, the illusions of morality can never fully shield us again. In Machiavelli's writings, two concepts dominate the landscape of power. These are fortuna and virtù. To understand his playbook, we must first understand them. Fortuna is often translated as fortune or luck. It represents the unpredictable elements of life. It is the flood that can sweep away kingdoms. It is the sudden death of a prince. It is the betrayal of allies, the revolt of citizens, the invasion of foreign armies. Fortuna is chaos made tangible virtù. On the other hand, is not morality. It is not virtue in the sense of goodness or justice. It is a kind of strength, skill, and decisiveness. It is the ability to shape circumstances. It is a capacity to act boldly, to plan wisely, and to respond quickly. Virtù allows a ruler to confront fortune and, when possible, to bend it to his will. Machiavelli presents these two forces as intertwined. Fortune is like a river that rises and falls without warning. Virtù is the dam, the levee, or the engineer who redirects the waters. Without virtù, fortuna will destroy even the strongest ruler. Without fortuna, virtù has no challenges to overcome, but its presence is constant. It tests leaders, punishes hesitation, and rewards audacity. Consider his famous river metaphor. Machiavelli describes fortune as a river that floods suddenly. The flood destroys villages, drowns cattle, and scatters crops. Those who prepare levees, who build channels, who anticipate the rising waters, survive. Those who do not are swept away. In human affairs, fortune functions in the same way. Wars, betrayals, deaths, and revolutions can overwhelm a state in an instant. Virtù is the preparation, the adaptability, and the courage to confront these forces. This does not mean that fortune can be fully controlled. Machiavelli is clear. Fortune is unpredictable and often cruel, but it can be mitigated. A prince who acts boldly, decisively, and with cunning can reduce the power of fortune. He can turn its unpredictability into opportunity. History is full of examples. Leaders who hesitated in crises perished. Leaders who seized the moment thrived. Machiavelli observes that fortune favors the bold vertic also requires knowledge and action. It is not enough to be courageous. A ruler must understand the world in which he lives. He must study the patterns of human behavior, the weaknesses of rivals, and the strengths of allies. Virtù is intelligence applied to power. It is flexibility combined with decisiveness. It is the ability to act swiftly when opportunity appears and to recover quickly when disaster strikes. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasizes that virtù must be practicable. A prince cannot rely on ideals alone. He must take risks, sometimes calculated, sometimes bold, to secure his position. He must not wait for luck or hope for fortune to protect him. Fortune may knock on the door, but only virtù can open it. The interplay of fortune and virtù appears in Machiavelli's historical examples. Consider Cesare Borgia. He inherited a position of power and expanded it through audacity and strategy. He knew when to use force, when to deceive, and when to negotiate. He acted decisively against enemies, and fortune, in some measure, favored him. Yet Borgia's success was not guaranteed. When his father, Pope Alexander VI, died, fortune turned. Borgia's enemies struck, and his state collapsed. This demonstrates the limits of virtù when fortune is overwhelming. Machiavelli also examines the role of timing in virtù. Acting too soon can provoke resistance before power is secure. Acting too late can allow enemies to consolidate their strength. A wise ruler observes carefully, prepares meticulously, and strikes with precision. Virtù is the skill of timing. It is the combination of preparation, courage, and intelligence. We must also consider the human dimension. Virtù is not only strategic, it is psychological. A ruler must inspire confidence, command respect, and manage fear. Virtù allows a leader to read the hearts of men, to discern who will betray, who will follow, and who will hesitate. It is the skill of understanding not just events, but people. Fortune tests the world. Virtù tests human nature. There is a deeper lesson here. Machiavelli does not glorify luck. He does not suggest that fortune alone creates great leaders. He insists that a ruler's success depends on his ability to seize opportunity, adapt to changing circumstances, and act decisively. Virtù is the engine that drives mastery over fortune. Without it, chaos reigns. With it, a skilled prince can turn crises into triumphs. This interplay explains why Machiavelli values preparation. A ruler must study war, politics, and human behavior. He must anticipate rebellion, treachery, and misfortune. Virtù is cultivated through experience, observation, and learning. A leader cannot rely on theory alone. Action, informed by knowledge, is the only path to stability. Yet Machiavelli warns against arrogance. Virtù is not omnipotence. It does not make a ruler invincible. Fortune will always remain partially beyond control. A wise leader recognizes this, adapts, and uses every opportunity to shape events. The The balance of virtù and fortuna is delicate. Too much reliance on one without respect for the other leads to disaster. Machiavelli's exploration of these concepts also has modern resonance. In politics, business, and personal ambition, we see fortune as chance and circumstance. Virtù is preparation, strategy, and decisiveness. Those who succeed are rarely the luckiest. They are the most capable of turning opportunity into advantage and disaster into survival. Finally, it is essential to understand the moral neutrality of Machiavelli's framework. Virtù is not about ethics. It is about effectiveness. Fortune is not about justice. It is about unpredictability. Together, they create a landscape where success is determined by skill, courage, and adaptability, not by adherence to moral ideals. This is the essence of Machiavelli's playbook. To master power, one must respect the force of fortune. One must cultivate virtù relentlessly. One must act decisively when opportunity arises. One must recognize the limits of human control and act within those boundaries. This is the anatomy of fortune and virtù. It is the foundation upon which all other strategies of Machiavelli will build. By understanding this, we begin to see how a ruler can survive in a world that is uncertain, dangerous, and ever-changing. Fortune will challenge him. Virtù will guide him. The wise prince knows when to bend, when to strike, and when to appear steady. This is the essence of the strategy that underlies every decision in Machiavelli's writings. Machiavelli confronts one of the most enduring questions of power. Is it better for a ruler to be loved or to be feared? This is not a question of morality. It is a question of survival. Leaders throughout history have struggled with it. The answer, according to Machiavelli, is complex, but it carries a clear warning. He begins by observing human nature. Men are generally self-interested. They will break promises, betray allies, and abandon leaders if it suits their advantage. They are fickle and changeable. Their loyalty is often dependent on circumstances rather than conviction. A ruler who relies solely on love risks being abandoned when it is inconvenient. Fear, in contrast, is more reliable. When men fear the consequences of disloyalty, they are less likely to act against a ruler. Fear can be controlled, punishments can be applied consistently. Laws and consequences create order. In Machiavelli's view, fear provides stability in a way that love cannot always guarantee. Yet Machiavelli does not advocate cruelty for its own sake. He warns against excessive cruelty that provokes hatred. Hatred is dangerous. It can unite enemies, inspire rebellion, and destroy a ruler. The wise leader uses fear strategically. He applies it decisively and at the right time. Fear must be measured and directed at threats, not at loyal subjects. Love, however, cannot be ignored entirely. People prefer to follow a leader who is respected and admired. Popular support reduces the need for harsh enforcement. A ruler who is loved can govern with less constant pressure. The ideal balance, according to Machiavelli, is to be feared without being hated. This requires skill, judgment, and careful management of perception. He illustrates this with historical examples. Consider Cesare Borgia. He was feared by his enemies and respected by his allies. He applied cruelty swiftly and decisively, eliminating threats before they could grow. Yet he avoided widespread hatred among the populace by controlling his image and demonstrating fairness to those who served him faithfully. Borgia's ability to combine fear with calculated generosity allowed him to maintain power effectively. Machiavelli also emphasizes the role of appearance in managing loyalty. A ruler must cultivate the perception of virtue, kindness, and justice. People must believe in his good intentions, even if they know he acts with calculation. This combination of fear and the appearance of love creates a form of control that is both effective and sustainable. He cautions against relying solely on love. History is full of rulers who were adored, but who fell because their followers placed personal interest above loyalty. Affection alone cannot ensure obedience. Love is fragile, easily broken by greed, ambition, or external pressure. Fear, however, can endure because it is grounded in consequences. The management of fear and love also requires understanding of human psychology. Machiavelli notes that men forgive injury quickly if they benefit from the ruler. They remember cruelty longer if it threatens them personally. A wise leader uses this knowledge to act decisively against enemies while reassuring allies. This creates a hierarchy of loyalty based on both respect and self-interest. Timing is essential. Fear applied too early can provoke resistance. Fear applied too late may allow threats to grow unchecked. Love applied indiscriminately may encourage complacency. Machiavelli teaches that the ruler must act like a conductor, orchestrating both fear and affection to maintain harmony in the state. He also addresses the relationship between fear, love, and reputation. A ruler's name is powerful. If people believe he is just, merciful, and strong, his authority is reinforced. Reputation amplifies both fear and love. A clever ruler manages his image with care, demonstrating strength when necessary and benevolence when advantageous. Machiavelli warns that extremes are dangerous. Excessive cruelty provokes hatred. Excessive leniency invites disobedience. Excessive reliance on affection leaves the ruler vulnerable to betrayal. The key is moderation and calculation. The ruler must constantly assess the loyalty of subjects and the stability of his power. Another important point is the unpredictability of human nature. People's emotions cannot be controlled completely. Leaders must accept that loyalty will fluctuate. Virtue, the skill and decisiveness we explored earlier, allows a ruler to respond to these fluctuations. By applying fear strategically and cultivating respect, he can shape loyalty in his favor. Machiavelli's insights extend beyond rulers. The principles of fear, love, and loyalty apply to leaders in all forms of organization. In business, politics, and social structures, those who understand human nature can maintain influence and control. Those who rely on idealized notions of affection or loyalty risk failure. He also highlights the symbolic dimension of fear and love. Public punishments, ceremonies, and displays of power communicate strength. Generosity, rewards, and recognition communicate benevolence. The combination of these signals reinforces loyalty while minimizing resentment. The careful use of symbols is part of the art of leadership. Finally, Machiavelli presents a stark choice. Leaders must decide where to place their reliance. They can seek love, risk invulnerability. They can seek fear, risk in hatred. The wise ruler achieves a balance that maximizes loyalty while minimizing threats. This balance is not fixed. It changes with circumstances, enemies, and the temperament of the populace. Constant attention and adaptation are required. Through these lessons, Machiavelli demonstrates that power is not granted. It is constructed. It is maintained through understanding, skill, and strategy. Fear and love are tools, not ends. They are instruments in the broader architecture of control. The ruler who masters them can survive where others fail. This exploration of fear, love, and loyalty illustrates the precision of Machiavelli's playbook. It shows his deep understanding of human behavior and the mechanics of authority. By studying these principles, we see why he remains one of the most influential thinkers in the history of political thought. The question we opened with returns now with greater weight. Is it better to be loved or to be feared? Machiavelli does not give a simple answer. He shows us that the wise ruler must navigate between these forces, mastering both when possible, balancing them against the unpredictable currents of fortune, and always remaining aware of the human tendencies that shape every political act. Machiavelli introduces one of his most memorable metaphors. He tells us that a successful ruler must be both a lion and a fox. This is not a simple comparison. It is a lesson in the duality required to maintain power. Strength alone is insufficient. Cunning alone is inadequate. Both must coexist within the leader. The lion represents strength and force. A lion attacks, overpowers, and defends territory with raw power. It inspires respect and fear. In human affairs, this symbolizes the use of direct action, military might, and authority to overcome obstacles. A ruler must know when to strike. Decisively, strength is necessary to confront enemies, suppress rebellion, and establish control. Without it, the state is vulnerable to internal and external threats. The fox, in contrast, represents cunning, intelligence, and deception. A fox senses traps and avoids danger. It uses strategy rather than brute force. In leadership, the fox symbolizes subtlety, manipulation, and foresight. A ruler must be able to recognize hidden threats, negotiate effectively, and manipulate appearances. Without cunning, even the strongest leader can be outmaneuvered. Machiavelli emphasizes that one quality without the other leads to failure. A ruler who relies only on strength may crush enemies, but he will be blind to subtler dangers. He may be betrayed by those he trusted or undermined by those he underestimated. A ruler who relies only on cunning may deceive allies and opponents. But he may lack the force to defend his power when open conflict arises. Survival requires a combination of both. He illustrates this through historical examples. Consider Cesare Borgia once again. Borgia combined military skill with political cunning. He knew when to fight directly and when to manipulate alliances. His ability to assess both open threats and hidden dangers allowed him to expand his influence. Quickly, when one element failed, his dual approach often compensated. demonstrating the importance of flexibility. The metaphor also highlights the adaptability required of a leader. The world is unpredictable. Enemies change tactics. Allies shift loyalties. Fortune intervenes. A ruler who is rigid, relying solely on force or solely on deception, risks destruction. The lion and the fox symbolize the capacity to switch strategies depending on circumstances. This adaptability is a cornerstone of Machiavelli's philosophy. Machiavelli warns that deception is often necessary. The fox allows the ruler to recognize traps, to anticipate betrayal, and to use appearances to maintain stability. A ruler may need to present mercy while acting ruthlessly, or appear weak while preparing to strike. The cunning use of perception enables a leader to shape events before they become crises. Strength, however, cannot be neglected. The lion ensures that the ruler can enforce decisions, command armies, and eliminate threats decisively. Without strength, cunning alone cannot secure power. A deceptive strategy without the capacity to enforce it fails. The world tests the ruler physically, and he must respond with force when required. This duality is not only practical, it is psychological. Subjects respond differently to strength and cunning. Fear of force demands respect. Awareness of cunning generates uncertainty in opponents, preventing them from acting impulsively. Loyalty, obedience, and alliance are shaped by both elements. The ruler who embodies both is unpredictable and therefore secure. Machiavelli also considers timing. The lion and the fox must be deployed according to circumstances. A time of rebellion may demand the strength of the lion. A time of diplomacy may demand the subtlety of the fox. A ruler who cannot read the situation or who applies the wrong method invites disaster. Success is contingent upon judgment as much as skill. The duality extends to internal governance as well. Rulers must manage advisors, nobles, and citizens with both strength and cunning. They must reward loyalty, punish betrayal, and manipulate perception. The lion ensures the power to act decisively. The fox ensures the capacity to navigate complex social and political networks. Together, they allow the ruler to maintain stability over time. Machiavelli also notes that appearances matter. The ruler should project the qualities of both animals. Even when they are not fully exercised, a leader who appears strong can deter enemies. A leader who appears cunning can prevent plots. Perception is an instrument of power, reinforcing both force and strategy. The lesson for leaders is clear. One cannot rely solely on morality, ideology, or a single skill. Survival demands versatility, perception, and intelligence applied to action. The lion and the fox are not symbols of good or evil. They are tools for navigating the realities of human behavior. Leaders who master both can withstand fortune, outmaneuver enemies, and maintain control. Machiavelli's metaphor also has a modern application. Leaders in business, politics, and society face challenges similar to those of Renaissance princes. Threats come from competitors, shifts in power, and unpredictable circumstances. The balance of force and strategy, boldness and cunning remains essential. Those who rely exclusively on one approach fail to achieve lasting success. Finally, This duality emphasizes preparation and self-awareness. A ruler must cultivate both strength and intelligence continually. Complacency in one domain invites disaster. The combination of lion and fox requires constant vigilance, learning, and adjustment. Leadership is not a static condition. It is an ongoing process of adaptation and mastery. Machiavelli's insight is that the art of power is not a single skill. It is a composite of capabilities applied with judgment. The lion and the fox exemplify this. They teach that power is dynamic, conditional, and deeply intertwined with human nature. A leader who embodies this duality understands both the threats he faces and the opportunities he can seize. By studying this principle, we begin to see the depth of Machiavelli's strategy. Power is never absolute. It must be constantly managed. Force and cunning are complementary tools. They must be balanced, applied with foresight, and adapted to shifting circumstances. This understanding sets the foundation for every further strategy in Machiavelli's playbook. Machiavelli addresses one of the most controversial aspects of his philosophy. He argues that cruelty, when applied correctly, can be necessary for the stability of a state. This idea challenges conventional morality. It is not intended to shock. For its own sake, it is practical. It is rooted in the realities of human behavior and political survival. He begins by distinguishing between types of cruelty. There is cruelty that is well used. There is cruelty that is excessive or poorly timed. Well-used cruelty is decisive. It is applied quickly and with purpose. It eliminates threats, prevents rebellion, and secures authority. Poorly used cruelty is endless and arbitrary. It breeds hatred, fear without respect, and eventual collapse. Machiavelli explains that cruelty is most effective when it is limited and targeted. A ruler may need to eliminate rivals or punish conspirators. When this is done decisively, the message is clear. Potential enemies understand the consequences of opposition. This type of cruelty prevents disorder, it consolidates power, it does not invite continuous resistance because it is controlled. Historical examples illustrate his point. Consider Cesare Borgia. Borgia faced a fragmented state and rebellious subjects. He acted with ruthless efficiency against those who threatened his authority. Ramiro the Orco, one of his lieutenants, was sent to enforce discipline. The people initially resented the actions, but Borgia quickly executed the Orco, presenting himself as just. The cruelty served a purpose, and then it ended. This calculated approach stabilized the region. Machiavelli emphasizes that cruelty must be applied at the beginning of a ruler's tenure. Early decisive actions prevent prolonged unrest. Hesitation allows enemies to grow stronger and emboldens conspirators. Once a ruler establishes control through measured force, ongoing cruelty becomes less necessary. The goal is to secure loyalty, not to perpetuate fear indefinitely. He also warns against arbitrary cruelty. Violence without purpose undermines authority. It creates resentment. It destabilizes rather than strengthens. The wise leader uses cruelty as a tool, not as an expression of personal anger. Decisions must be calculated and disciplined. Emotion alone is insufficient and dangerous. Machiavelli extends his analysis to the broader principle of necessity. Rulers exist in a world of danger. Enemies plot, allies betray, and fortune is unpredictable. In this context, cruelty is often unavoidable. It is the means by which order is maintained and the state preserved. Without it, instability spreads. Without it, even the most virtuous ruler can be overthrown. The psychological dimension is important. People fear what is visible and immediate. When a ruler applies force decisively, the population learns the consequences of disobedience. This fear can be controlled and focused. In contrast, excessive leniency or delayed punishment allows resentment to fester. Threats multiply when cruelty is inconsistent or unclear. Machiavelli also highlights the perception of cruelty. A ruler should not appear cruel for its own sake. Actions should be framed as necessary for the common good or for the security of the state. Public perception shapes loyalty. People tolerate force if it is justified and purposeful. They rebel when cruelty seems arbitrary or self-serving. Timing, again, is essential. Initial acts of cruelty secure authority. After stability is established, further violence can be reduced. The ruler can shift focus to appearances of mercy, justice, and virtue. This balance between force and benevolence creates a stable environment where loyalty is earned and rebellion is minimized. He contrasts this approach with inaction. Leaders who hesitate to apply necessary force often face prolonged conflict. Revolts persist, enemies grow bolder, and alliances shift unpredictably. The failure to act decisively in critical moments leads to greater suffering and eventual downfall. Cruelty, when properly applied, prevents this escalation. Machiavelli also warns against cruelty motivated by personal desire. A ruler must never act purely out of vengeance. The goal is not to indulge anger or assert ego. The goal is the preservation of the state. This disciplined use of force distinguishes effective rulers from tyrants who provoke hatred and rebellion. He explores the relationship between cruelty and fear. Cruelty generates fear, but fear must be carefully controlled. The ruler who is feared but not hated maintains authority. Those who apply excessive, indiscriminate cruelty provoke hatred and ultimately destabilize their position. Fear must be directed strategically, not indiscriminately. Machiavelli's insights extend beyond the battlefield. Internal governance, management of nobles, and handling of conspiracies all require careful application of force. The principles of decisive action, targeted punishment, and public perception apply in political, social, and administrative contexts. Modern examples illustrate these principles. Leaders who act decisively to confront threats often maintain stability, while leaders who hesitate or act inconsistently invite chaos. Strategic force, applied with purpose, is not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It is a calculated method of maintaining order. Finally, Machiavelli emphasizes the moral neutrality of these actions. Cruelty is neither inherently good nor evil. Its value is measured by results. The wise ruler considers the long-term stability of the state. He acts decisively when necessary, restrains force when possible, and manages perception carefully. Through this lens, cruelty becomes a tool, a necessary instrument for survival. It is not arbitrary, it is not personal, it is part of the disciplined exercise of power. To ignore this principle is to misunderstand the realities of governance. To apply it without judgment is to invite destruction. The balance, timing, and purpose of cruelty determine the ruler's success. By understanding the necessity of cruelty, we begin to see how Machiavelli redefines power. He strips away comforting illusions. He shows that stability requires action, decisiveness, and control. Leaders must confront danger, manage perception, and use force strategically. This principle underpins much of the remaining strategies in his playbook. Machiavelli understood that power is not only about force or cunning, it is also about perception. How a ruler is seen can determine whether he succeeds or falls. Reputation is a currency of authority. Image shapes loyalty. The theater of power is the stage on which a ruler performs to maintain control. He begins by emphasizing that appearances matter more than reality in the eyes of the public. People judge leaders based on what they see, not always on what they know. A ruler may act with calculation, manipulation, or even deception, but the perception of virtue, justice, and courage solidifies authority. Maintaining this perception is essential to survival. Machiavelli notes that a ruler must project qualities that inspire both respect and admiration. He should appear merciful, faithful, humane, and religious. Yet he should also demonstrate strength, decisiveness, and strategic intelligence. These qualities may not always exist fully in practice, but their display maintains confidence among subjects and allies. He illustrates this through historical examples. Consider the Medici family in Florence. Their authority relied heavily on appearances. They cultivated images of piety, patronage, and civic responsibility, even while engaging in ruthless political maneuvers. The perception of virtue protected their power and allowed them to govern effectively. Public ceremonies and symbolic actions are central to the theater of power. Processions, proclamations, and displays of generosity communicate a ruler's qualities. These rituals reinforce authority and shape public opinion. A wise ruler uses symbolism strategically to complement practical governance. Actions and appearances together create stability and influence. Machiavelli warns against inconsistency between image and action. If a ruler is perceived as just but acts cruelly without explanation, trust erodes. If he appears merciful but fails to act decisively when necessary, fear and respect diminish. The alignment of perception and action is delicate. Leaders must cultivate both carefully. He also emphasizes that reputation affects both allies and enemies. Allies are more likely to support a ruler who is respected and admired. Enemies are more likely to hesitate if they believe a leader is capable, decisive, and shrewd. Reputation amplifies the impact of both fear and love. It extends influence beyond immediate actions and creates strategic leverage. Machiavelli explores the importance of consistency. While flexibility is essential in tactics, the public perception of a ruler must appear stable. Sudden changes in behavior or values can create uncertainty and doubt. A stable image fosters loyalty, trust, and deference. A reputation for strength, wisdom, or justice protects a ruler from instability. He examines how rulers can manipulate perception deliberately. Deception is not inherently evil in this context. It is a tool. A ruler may appear merciful while acting decisively or appear humble while exercising authority firmly. By managing appearances, the ruler controls not only immediate reactions, but also the long-term loyalty of subjects. Machiavelli also highlights the interplay of private action and public display. A ruler may act ruthlessly in private to secure control while presenting fairness publicly. The effectiveness of power often depends on this duality. The public cannot witness every act. What they perceive shapes their behavior. Clever leaders leverage this to maintain order. Historical examples extend to military leaders as well. A general who appears disciplined, courageous, and strategic inspires confidence among troops. Soldiers follow not only because of orders, but also because of belief in competence. Reputation reinforces obedience and enhances effectiveness in both governance and warfare. Machiavelli also considers the fragility of reputation. A single scandal or misstep can undermine decades of careful cultivation. Leaders must guard against false reports, betrayal, and rumor. Information management is essential. The theater of power includes not only actions, but the narrative that surrounds them. He emphasizes that reputation is cumulative. Small acts of courage, fairness, or generosity build perception over time. Strategic displays amplify influence. Similarly, repeated acts of cruelty or indecision erode credibility. The ruler must understand the long-term effects of each decision. On public perception, Machiavelli also examines the use of storytelling and legacy. Leaders often shape their image through narratives that highlight successes and obscure failures. Propaganda, public records, and controlled accounts of events all contribute to the theater of power. The ruler who controls the story controls the memory of his rule. He warns that relying solely on appearances without substance is dangerous. A ruler may deceive temporarily, but if underlying weaknesses exist, fortune will expose them. Strength, cunning, and decisiveness must underpin image. Reputation amplifies power, but cannot replace competence. Modern parallels are clear. In politics, business, and society, leaders manage public perception constantly. Media, communication, and symbolic actions influence loyalty, respect, and obedience. The principles Machiavelli outlined centuries ago remain relevant. Reputation shapes decisions, alliances, and opportunities. Finally, Machiavelli emphasizes the integration of all elements of power. Reputation, force, cunning, cruelty, and appearance are not separate. They interact. A wise ruler balances them to maintain authority. Perception enhances action. Action reinforces perception. Together, they create a resilient, adaptive, and effective system of governance. Through understanding the theater of power, we see that leadership is both practical and performative. A ruler must master not only the mechanics of control, but also the art of influence. Every gesture, decision, and public appearance contributes to the stability of the state. Reputation is the stage upon which all other strategies unfold. By studying these lessons, we begin to see Machiavelli not as a promoter of immorality, but as an analyst of survival and influence. Leaders who understand perception and cultivate their image can navigate challenges, inspire loyalty, and maintain power in ways that are both strategic and enduring. Machiavelli understood that power does not exist in isolation. A ruler is surrounded by allies, adversaries, and opportunists. Success depends on the careful management of relationships. Friendships, loyalties, and enmities are tools to be understood and used wisely. He begins by emphasizing the impermanence of alliances. People are motivated by self-interest. Allies today may become enemies tomorrow. Shared goals are often temporary. The wise ruler anticipates these shifts. He maintains awareness of the intentions and ambitions of those around him. Trust, Machiavelli argues, must be strategic. Blind faith in allies is dangerous. A ruler cannot assume loyalty based solely on past favors or friendship. Those who seem most devoted may betray at the moment of greatest opportunity. Conversely, apparent rivals may be managed or even converted into useful allies if their ambitions align temporarily with the ruler's objectives. He provides historical examples to illustrate these points. Florence, Venice, and other Italian city-states were constantly shifting in alliances. Leaders who relied too heavily on external support often found themselves abandoned when foreign powers pursued their own interests. Survival required vigilance and flexibility. Alliances must be nurtured, tested, and sometimes replaced. Machiavelli emphasizes the importance of understanding human motivation. People act primarily out of self-interest, fear, or ambition. A ruler who misreads the desires and incentives of allies risks being manipulated. He must study the character and behavior of those around him carefully. Observing actions is often more revealing than listening to words. He also addresses betrayal. It is inevitable in human affairs. Rulers must plan for it. Defensive measures such as dividing potential adversaries, rewarding loyalty, and punishing treachery decisively reduce the likelihood of surprise attacks. Machiavelli stresses that swift and calculated responses to betrayal send clear signals, reinforcing both fear and respect. Another principle is the selective cultivation of friends and enemies. Not all alliances are equally valuable. The ruler must identify those who can contribute to stability, military strength, or economic advantage. Some rivals can be left unchecked if their ambitions are contained. Others must be neutralized through diplomacy, coercion, or strategic force. Proper management ensures that threats are minimized while benefits are maximized. Machiavelli also highlights the importance of adaptability. Relationships are not static. Circumstances change. A once trusted ally may become dangerous. A previously hostile neighbor may become an opportunity for alliance. The successful ruler continually reassesses the political landscape. Decisions must be based on the current balance of power, not past assumptions or sentiments. He examines the role of deception in managing allies and enemies. Transparency can be exploited, The ruler must sometimes conceal intentions, provide misleading signals, or present false security to maintain advantage. Deception is a tool, not a moral failing. When used to preserve the state and protect power, historical examples reinforce these lessons. The Papal States frequently negotiated alliances with city-states and foreign powers. Those who overestimated loyalty or underestimated ambition often lost territory or influence. Leaders who balanced diplomacy with readiness for conflict maintained authority more effectively. Machiavelli's observations emphasized pragmatism over idealism. He also considers the psychological impact of power. Allies observe how a ruler handles threats, betrayal, and opportunity. Swift action and decisive judgment inspire confidence. Hesitation and indecision undermine trust. Reputation, decisively linked to behavior, shapes future relationships. Allies and enemies alike adjust their strategies based on perceived strength and intelligence. Machiavelli warns against over-reliance on any single ally. Dependence creates vulnerability. The ruler must cultivate multiple connections, balancing relationships to prevent any one party from gaining excessive influence. This approach reduces the risk of betrayal and maintains freedom of action. Conversely, the management of enemies requires both caution and initiative. Enemies left unchecked grow stronger. They form alliances, exploit weaknesses, and may strike unexpectedly. A prudent ruler observes potential adversaries, predicts their moves, and acts preemptively when necessary. Timing and decisiveness are essential. He further distinguishes between permanent and temporary alliances. Temporary alliances serve immediate goals. Permanent alliances require trust, compatibility, and ongoing management. A ruler must recognize the difference and treat each relationship accordingly. Mismanaging this distinction can lead to catastrophic failures. Machiavelli also emphasizes the value of balance. The ruler must reward loyalty, punish betrayal, and maintain the perception of fairness. Allies who feel secure are more likely to support the ruler. Enemies who see strength may hesitate or retreat. The art of maintaining equilibrium between friends and foes is central to stability. The chapter also explores contingency planning. The ruler must anticipate shifts in loyalty and the emergence of new threats. By preparing for multiple scenarios, he ensures that betrayal or unexpected opposition does not lead to collapse. Flexibility and foresight are the hallmarks of skillful leadership. Machiavelli concludes that the management of relationships is an ongoing task. Power is dynamic, and human behavior is unpredictable. The ruler's survival depends on vigilance, judgment, and adaptability. Understanding human ambition, fear, and self-interest allows the ruler to navigate complex networks of friends and enemies. Finally, these lessons have modern relevance. Corporate leaders, politicians, and social strategists face analogous challenges. Alliances form and dissolve. Rivals emerge unpredictably. Understanding motivations, maintaining reputation, and managing perception remain critical. Machiavelli's analysis of friends and enemies provides insight into human behavior and the dynamics of influence. By mastering alliances, anticipating betrayal, and managing relationships with skill and judgment, the ruler secures stability and extends authority. This is the essence of Machiavelli's guidance. Power is relational, adaptive, and dependent on understanding the currents of human nature. Machiavelli presents a paradoxical view of religion. He does not dismiss faith entirely, yet he emphasizes its utility as a tool for rulers. Religion, in his eyes, is a mechanism for shaping human behavior. It unifies, motivates, and controls populations. He admires its practical effects rather than its spiritual truths. He begins by examining the role of religion in society. Religion establishes rules and moral codes. It encourages obedience to laws. It provides a shared framework of values. Citizens are guided by fear of divine punishment as well as social expectation. This shared belief system strengthens social cohesion. A ruler who harnesses this can govern more effectively. Machiavelli admires Roman religion for its practical virtues. The ancient Romans used rituals, festivals, and public devotion to unify the state. Religion reinforced loyalty to the republic. Citizens internalized the values necessary for civic duty. The gods themselves, in Roman practice, were instruments of order. This example demonstrates how faith can stabilize power. He emphasizes the distinction between personal belief and public utility. A ruler may or may not be devout. What matters is the appearance of piety. Public displays of religious devotion create trust and legitimacy. Citizens are reassured when their leader observes sacred customs. This perception reinforces authority. Faith becomes a political instrument, independent of private conviction. Machiavelli warns against neglecting religion entirely. A state that appears irreligious or dismissive of sacred traditions risks alienating its people. Citizens may interpret this as moral weakness or disrespect for communal norms. Revolts, disobedience, and factionalism become more likely. Leaders must manage perception as carefully as they manage armies. He explores the paradox of morality in leadership. Ethical behavior is valuable when it supports stability. Rulers should maintain the appearance of virtue, honesty, and justice. Yet personal morality is secondary to effectiveness. Actions are justified by results rather than abstract principles. Religion helps bridge the gap between moral expectation and practical governance. Machiavelli introduces a suspenseful question. Is religion, for him, less about God than about human obedience? He implies that the sacred functions primarily to regulate behavior. The threat of divine punishment or social censure encourages loyalty. Citizens are motivated to act in ways that sustain the state. Faith becomes an instrument of political control. He analyzes how rulers can utilize religious structures. Priests, temples, rituals, and laws reinforce obedience. Leaders who control religious messaging can direct attention, unify populations, and suppress dissent. Religion becomes a stabilizing force, reducing reliance on coercion and military enforcement alone. Historical examples illustrate this principle. The Roman Republic, as Machiavelli admired, integrated religion into public life. Festivals, sacrifices, and civic rituals reinforced collective identity. Leaders who neglected religious appearances often faced instability. The power of perception, supported by shared belief, reinforced authority more effectively than force. Alone, Machiavelli also highlights the psychological dimension. People are more likely to follow laws and respect authority when they believe the ruler shares their values. Ritual, symbolism, and demonstration of piety cultivate trust. Even if a ruler privately doubts or manipulates faith, the public perception is what matters. Religion becomes a form of social technology. He contrasts genuine devotion with performative faith. Personal belief is not required for effective governance. What matters is consistent display. Leaders who observe sacred customs, attend ceremonies, and speak in morally resonant terms project stability. Citizens respond to visible piety. The mask of religion is a tool to maintain social order. Machiavelli further explores the consequences of neglecting this tool. A ruler who appears impious risks alienating both the people and the elite. Disrespect for religious norms can be interpreted as moral corruption, inviting rebellion and resistance. Maintaining the appearance of faith is therefore both pragmatic and necessary. He examines the interplay between religion and law. Laws gain additional authority when reinforced by moral and sacred frameworks. Citizens perceive obedience as both a civic duty and a spiritual obligation. This dual motivation enhances compliance and reduces the need for constant enforcement. Religion becomes intertwined with governance. Machiavelli also considers the long-term effects of religious manipulation. Stability achieved through shared belief can endure beyond a ruler's lifetime. Citizens internalize norms and expectations. Institutions anchored in religious or moral frameworks continue to function. Religion, in this sense, is both a stabilizing force and a legacy of authority. He warns that superficiality alone is insufficient. Religious appearances must be credible and consistent. Contradictions between words and actions weaken influence. Rituals, observance, and public demonstration reinforce credibility. The ruler who carefully manages both perception and action maintains legitimacy. Finally, Machiavelli emphasizes that religion is inseparable from the exercise of power. It is not simply a private matter. It functions as a tool, a mechanism for obedience, and a means of reinforcing social cohesion. The prudent ruler integrates faith into the architecture of authority, using it to stabilize the state while pursuing pragmatic objectives. By studying Machiavelli's approach, we see a ruler who understands human behavior deeply. Religion is valued not for spiritual enlightenment, but for its capacity to unify, motivate, and control. This principle demonstrates the sophisticated pragmatism at the core of Machiavelli's philosophy of power. Machiavelli places audacity at the center of political success. He asserts that fortune favors the bold. Leaders who act decisively seize opportunities, shape events, and maintain control. Hesitation, by contrast, invites misfortune and collapse. Boldness is not reckless. It is calculated, informed, and timely. He introduces the concept of fortune as a force that can be influenced. Fortune is unpredictable. It presents opportunities and challenges. Machiavelli famously writes that fortune must be beaten down like a woman. This brutal metaphor reflects his view that fortune yields to strength, courage, and action. It does not act on its own. Leaders must impose their will upon it. Bold action is closely linked to ambition. Leaders must pursue goals with energy and determination. Passive rulers wait for events to unfold. They react rather than shape outcome. Machiavelli argues that ambition combined with audacity allows a ruler to convert opportunity into lasting power. Hesitation, even in favorable circumstances, often leads to failure. He contrasts decisive leaders with hesitant ones. Hesitant rulers analyze endlessly, delay action, and overvalue caution. They often miss fleeting opportunities. Bold leaders, by contrast, take calculated risks. They act swiftly, exploit weaknesses in rivals, and adapt as circumstances change. History demonstrates that fortune rewards initiative. Cesare Borgia serves as a prime example. Borgia confronted a fractured Italy with energy, strategy, and decisiveness. He combined military skill with cunning diplomacy. He acted rapidly against rivals and exploited every opportunity. His boldness allowed him to consolidate power and extend influence where more cautious leaders might have failed. In contrast, Florentine republicans struggled to respond effectually to crises. Internal divisions, indecision, and excessive adherence to process prevented swift action. They failed to capitalize on opportunities and were often outmaneuvered by more audacious opponents. Machiavelli observes that hesitation is deadlier than bold failure. Taking risks may fail, but inaction guarantees vulnerability. He emphasizes that boldness must be tempered with judgment. Reckless action without strategy is dangerous. Audacity is effective only when informed by knowledge, observation, and assessment of risks. Leaders must weigh consequences, anticipate responses, and act with precision. Boldness without direction can provoke disaster. Machiavelli also discusses the timing of action. Fortune rewards those who strike at the right moment. Hesitation allows rivals to strengthen, alliances to shift, and opportunities to vanish. Bold action involves both speed and discernment. The capacity to recognize the decisive moment separates effective leaders from indecisive ones. He explores the psychological dimension of audacity. Bold leaders inspire confidence and fear. Subjects respect decisiveness. Rivals hesitate in the face of initiative. Ambition, when demonstrated through action, conveys authority. In contrast, hesitation signals weakness and invites challenges. Boldness is both practical and symbolic. Historical examples reinforce these principles. Leaders who seize power during crises often achieve lasting authority. Those who delay, even with superior resources, risk being overtaken by rivals. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasizes that fortune favors those willing to act decisively and courageously. He also examines the interplay of risk and reward. Bold decisions carry potential for failure, but the consequences of hesitation are often greater. Leaders who fail while acting decisively can recover. Leaders who hesitate frequently lose control entirely. Risk, when calculated and embraced, becomes a tool for power. Machiavelli stresses that audacity affects both internal and external politics. Domestically, decisive action quells dissent and inspires loyalty. Externally, it deters aggression and exploits weaknesses in rivals. Boldness establishes initiative. Hesitation surrenders it. Maintaining momentum is central to sustaining authority. The metaphor of fortune as a woman underscores the active role leaders must play. Fortune does not yield passively. It responds to courage, energy, and assertive effort. Leaders shape their destiny by imposing their will upon circumstances. This principle highlights the dynamic relationship between human action and unpredictable events. He further explores the cumulative effect of boldness. A leader who consistently acts decisively builds reputation and credibility. Subjects and allies observe audacity as competence. Rivals perceive a pattern of strength and initiative. Over time, bold action creates a self-reinforcing cycle of authority and influence. Machiavelli also examines failures of audacity. Leaders who act boldly without preparation, intelligence, or strategy invite disaster. Success requires both courage and competence. Boldness is a necessary condition for power, but it is not sufficient alone. Knowledge, skill, and foresight are equally essential. He concludes with the central lesson: hesitation is deadlier than bold failure. Inaction allows rivals to advance, fortune to shift, and opportunities to disappear. Bold, calculated action may encounter setbacks, but it preserves initiative and maximizes the possibility of success. Hesitation guarantees loss. Through this analysis, Machiavelli emphasizes a core principle of his philosophy. Ambition, courage, and decisive action define effective leadership. Fortune favors those who confront uncertainty actively, shape events strategically, and refuse to be paralyzed by risk. Boldness is both a weapon and a shield in the machinery of power. Machiavelli admired the Roman Republic. He saw in it a model of political strength, resilience, and adaptability. Unlike principalities ruled by a single prince, republics distributed power. Authority was shared among institutions, citizens, and elites. This structure created stability, accountability, and long-term endurance. He begins by contrasting republics with monarchies. Principalities concentrate power in one individual. Decision-making is rapid but highly dependent on the ruler's abilities. The state is vulnerable if the prince is weak, indecisive, or corrupt. Republics, by contrast, distribute authority across councils, assemblies, and magistrates. This diffusion limits the impact of individual failings and strengthens institutions. Machiavelli praises the capacity of republics to harness civic virtue. Citizens are motivated to participate in governance because they have a stake in the states. Survival, engagement fosters loyalty, accountability, and shared responsibility. By contrast, subjects of principalities often lack initiative or investment in the welfare of the state. Civic participation strengthens resilience. He emphasizes that republics are not without challenges. Managing factions, competing interests, and popular ambitions requires skill. Balancing the influence of elites and the broader population is essential. The state must allow freedom while maintaining order. Too much liberty invites chaos. Too much control breeds resentment. The art of governance is in finding this balance. Machiavelli presents suspenseful insight. He is not simply a cynic focused on manipulation. He also values liberty when it is managed wisely. Freedom, in his philosophy, is not chaotic license. It is structured participation. Laws, institutions, and disciplined civic engagement enable citizens to exercise influence without undermining stability. Liberty, when harnessed, strengthens power. He analyzes Rome's example. The Roman Republic maintained equilibrium between the Senate, magistrates, and the people. Elites provided experience and strategic oversight. Citizens offered legitimacy, manpower, and engagement. This balance preserved stability, allowed flexibility, and mitigated risks posed by individual weaknesses. Machiavelli admires the synergy of collective governance. By contrast, principalities often rely on fear, coercion, or personal charisma to maintain authority. Stability is contingent on the ruler's competence and the loyalty of a few elites. This makes principalities more vulnerable to fortune, internal conspiracy, and rebellion. Republics, by dispersing power and fostering civic responsibility, are better equipped to endure crises. Machiavelli also examines the role of laws in republics. Legal frameworks create predictable rules, reducing the influence of arbitrary decisions. Institutions enforce laws consistently, maintaining fairness and legitimacy. In principalities, law often depends on the ruler's whims. In republics, law is institutionalized, creating stability and long-term resilience. He highlights the importance of civic virtue. Citizens must be invested in the common good. Participation is not merely symbolic, it is functional. Civic education, military service, and public engagement cultivate loyalty and responsibility. A republic thrives when citizens act both freely and prudently. Liberty must be disciplined to be effective. Machiavelli also explores the dangers of imbalance. If elites dominate excessively, the population may rebel. If the people wield unchecked influence, disorder can follow. Successful republics manage tensions through structured participation, checks and balances, and the cultivation of respect for institutions. The equilibrium between freedom and control is delicate but achievable. He emphasizes that republics are dynamic. They adapt to changing circumstances, harness collective strength, and endure when well governed. Principalities, in contrast, often falter under poor leadership. When the ruler is incapacitated, the state's survival is threatened. Machiavelli's analysis suggests that republics are more resilient by design. Historical examples reinforce these lessons. Florence, Venice, and Rome illustrate the strengths and weaknesses of republics. Rome's system, in particular, demonstrates the power of structured liberty, balanced authority, and active citizenship. Machiavelli draws enduring lessons from these examples for both rulers and citizens. Machiavelli also notes that principalities and republics share common vulnerabilities. Corruption, factionalism, and complacency can destabilize any government. The difference lies in the mechanisms for managing these risks. Republics possess institutions and participation that absorbs shocks. Principalities rely largely on the ruler's ability to respond effectively. He examines the tension between freedom and security. Citizens must feel free enough to engage, innovate, and participate, but constrained enough to prevent chaos. Machiavelli stresses that liberty is valuable when it serves the state's stability and long-term strength. Unmanaged freedom threatens survival. Carefully balanced liberty sustains power. Finally, Machiavelli concludes that the choice between republic and principality depends on context, skill, and circumstance. Principalities offer speed and centralized decision-making, but are fragile. Republics require management of complex relationships and institutions, but endure when cultivated wisely. Leaders must understand the dynamics of power and human behavior. To maintain authority in either system, by studying Machiavelli's analysis, we see that he values liberty, not abstractly, but as a practical instrument. Freedom strengthens the state when structured, disciplined, and balanced against control. The study of republics reveals how power can be distributed without sacrificing stability, and how leadership can harness collective strength to withstand both internal and external threats. Machiavelli's life took a dramatic turn in 1512. The Medici returned to power in Florence. Machiavelli, once a diplomat and senior official, was suddenly cast out. His career ended abruptly. He was accused of conspiracy, imprisoned, and subjected to torture. The physical pain was brief, but the humiliation and desperation lingered. Exile followed. He retreated to his family estate in the countryside. Isolated, stripped of office, and under constant scrutiny, Machiavelli faced the reality of personal and political ruin. This period of displacement, however, became fertile ground for his ideas. In solitude, he turned experience, observation, and reflection into a framework for understanding power. It is in this context that he began writing The Prince. The text is more than a treatise. It is a calculated communication. Machiavelli presents his most daring insights on leadership, manipulation, and survival. Yet there is an underlying tension. Is this guidance sincere, ironic, or a survival strategy? The uncertainty itself adds to the drama of the work. The Prince can also be seen as a job application to the Medici. Machiavelli presents himself as a thinker capable of advising rulers, particularly Lorenzo de' Medici. Every paragraph balances demonstration of knowledge with subtle flattery. It is strategic, persuasive, and highly personal. He seeks to regain influence and relevance through the written word. Suspense is central to understanding this moment. Imagine Machiavelli seated at his desk, quill in hand, contemplating the boldest ideas he has ever conceived. He writes of cruelty, deception, and manipulation, fully aware of the dangers these thoughts carry if misinterpreted. Every sentence is calculated, every example carefully chosen. He is both fearless and cunning. Machiavelli's writing reflects a mind sharpened by adversity. Exile forced him to analyze politics with clarity and detachment. Personal experience, observation of leaders, and historical case studies converge in his analyses. The Prince emerges as a concentrated playbook of power distilled from the turbulence of Italian politics. He also reflects on the morality of rulers. In exile, he confronts the paradox of ethics in governance. Leaders must act decisively and sometimes ruthlessly. Yet the survival of the state often demands choices that defy conventional morality. Machiavelli writes, not as a moralist, but as a realist. The prince is a mirror reflecting the world as it is, not as it should be. Historical examples animate the text. Cesare Borgia, notorious for cunning and decisiveness, embodies the lessons. Machiavelli admired the strategies he describes are drawn from observation, not imagination. Each case illustrates the consequences of action or inaction, courage or hesitation, loyalty or betrayal. The examples lend urgency and credibility to his argument. The writing process itself is dramatic. Exile breeds tension, reflection, and intensity. Machiavelli composes a work that is audacious in content and form. He imagines the Medici reading his words, evaluating his intellect, and judging his insight. The stakes are personal and political. The Prince is a performance as much as a treatise. Suspense continues in the interpretation of the Prince. Scholars debate its intent. Was it sincere advice intended to guide rulers toward effective governance? Was it satire exposing the brutality of politics through exaggeration? Or was it itself a mask, concealing Machiavelli's personal vulnerabilities and ambitions? The ambiguity enhances the text's power and intrigue. He also reflects on exile as a catalyst for intellectual creation. Removed from office, Machiavelli gains the freedom to think without constraint. Observations of power, human ambition, and political dynamics crystallize into concise, radical insights. Exile transforms adversity into opportunity, misfortune, into intellectual productivity. The text combines theory and practice. Machiavelli does not write abstractly. He examines practical methods to acquire, consolidate, and maintain power. Each chapter addresses real threats, human weaknesses, and strategic possibilities. The Prince is simultaneously a manual, a demonstration of expertise, and a calculated appeal to potential patrons. He illustrates the tension between fear and love, fortune and audacity, cruelty and mercy. Each paradox is heightened by his own precarious situation. Writing from exile, Machiavelli confronts the realities he himself has endured, the dangers of fortune, the fragility of position, and the necessity of decisive action. Finally, he confronts his own legacy within the Prince. By distilling his observations into a coherent guide, Machiavelli ensures that his ideas endure beyond personal misfortune. Exile, pain, and political ruin become a backdrop for intellectual immortality. His analysis of power, paradoxical as it may be, survives as a testament to the synthesis of experience, reflection, and daring thought. Through this chapter, we understand the Prince not merely as a book, but as a dramatic act of survival, strategy, and insight. Machiavelli transforms personal catastrophe into a timeless exploration of power, human nature, and the enduring dynamics of politics. Machiavelli's influence extends far beyond his lifetime. His observations on power, human nature, and governance shaped political philosophy for centuries. From the Renaissance to the Enlightenment and into modern politics, his ideas continue to resonate. His work challenges leaders, theorists, and citizens to confront the realities of power without illusions. He begins by examining Machiavelli's immediate impact. During the Renaissance, rulers and thinkers studied his writings with keen interest. The prince became a reference point for understanding strategy, diplomacy, and authority. Machiavelli's clarity in analyzing human behavior and political dynamics set him apart from moralistic or idealistic treatises of his time. Enlightenment thinkers engaged deeply with his ideas. Figures like Rousseau and Montesquieu read Machiavelli as both a caution and a guide. His emphasis on observation, pragmatism, and the mechanics of power influenced debates about liberty, the structure of government, and the role of laws. Machiavelli's work helped shift political philosophy from abstract ideals to practical analysis. He also examines the adoption of his concepts by modern leaders. Military commanders, diplomats, and statesmen study his principles to understand negotiation, strategy, and human behavior. The capacity to anticipate rivals, manipulate perception, and act decisively remains central to effective leadership. Machiavelli's insights are applied not as prescriptions of morality, but as tools for practical advantage. The term Machiavellian illustrates his enduring reputation. It evokes cunning, calculation, and sometimes ruthless manipulation. While often used pejoratively, the term also recognizes his penetrating understanding of political dynamics. Leaders and scholars alike associate his name with the ability to navigate complexity, manage ambition, and maintain authority. His ideas remain a benchmark for evaluating power. Machiavelli's writings challenge assumptions about morality in politics. He separates ethics from efficacy. Leaders cannot rely solely on virtue or sentiment. Success depends on understanding human nature, anticipating behavior, and taking decisive action. This stark realism transformed political thought and remains relevant in contemporary analyses. He traces the influence on Republican theory. Discourses on Livy inspired debates about civic virtue, balance of power, and the role of citizens. His analysis of Rome shaped modern conceptions of liberty, checks and balances, and institutional resilience. Machiavelli demonstrated how historical examples inform the design of governance. Machiavelli's influence extends to strategy and military theory. His insistence on preparedness, citizen militias, and decisive action informs modern military doctrine. The principle that fortune favors the bold continues to guide leaders in contexts ranging from warfare to diplomacy. Action, timing, and audacity remain critical. He also explores the cultural and intellectual dimension. Machiavelli's work provoked controversy precisely because it forced readers to confront uncomfortable truths. He challenged idealistic notions of leadership, morality, and human nature. By framing power as a dynamic, often ruthless interaction, he encouraged critical thinking and realistic assessment of political life. Suspense builds as he considers the duality of his legacy. Some interpret Machiavelli as a teacher of cynicism, revealing the darker side of politics. Others see him as a realist, exposing truths that leaders must understand to govern effectively. His writings provoke reflection on whether morality is subordinate to survival. strategy, and practical wisdom. He examines how his ideas endure in modern political analysis. Political scientists, historians, and strategists draw on Machiavelli to understand negotiation, influence, and institutional dynamics. Concepts such as manipulation of perception, the balance of fear and love, and the management of alliances remain central in the study of governance. Machiavelli also shaped debates about liberty and authority. His distinction between republics and principalities informs discussions about democracy, centralized power, and citizen participation. Leaders and theorists continue to grapple with questions of freedom, control, and institutional balance, echoing his analyses from centuries ago. He highlights that his enduring influence is not merely theoretical. The real-world application of his principles demonstrates their practical value. Leaders who understand human ambition, fortune, and the dynamics of power are better equipped to maintain authority, anticipate threats, and shape events. Machiavelli provides tools for navigating the complexities of political life. Finally, Machiavelli leaves us with a profound question. Did he reveal the truth of politics, stripped of illusion and idealism? Or did he invent a darker lens, teaching leaders to view human nature through suspicion, fear, and manipulation? The tension persists. His legacy forces reflection, debate, an examination of power in every age. Through this chapter, we see that Machiavelli's influence endures because he confronts the realities of human behavior and political life with unflinching clarity. His work continues to challenge, provoke, and inform leaders, scholars, and citizens alike. The playbook he left behind remains relevant, controversial, and profoundly instructive. We return to the opening question. Is it better to be loved or feared? Machiavelli does not give a simple answer. He suggests that leaders must navigate a complex interplay of both. Love can inspire loyalty, but it can also breed weakness. Fear can enforce obedience, but excessive cruelty can provoke rebellion. The tension between these forces defines the challenge of leadership. Machiavelli's playbook forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature. People are ambitious, self-interested, and unpredictable. Institutions and laws can guide behavior, but they cannot erase the realities of desire, fear, or ambition. Leaders must act with awareness of these truths if they hope to maintain power. Throughout his writings, we see that power is not abstract. It is practical, dynamic, and often unforgiving. Leadership requires courage, decisiveness, and sometimes ruthlessness. Machiavelli reminds us that morality, perception, and strategy are intertwined. Effective governance demands understanding, adaptation, and foresight. The reflection extends beyond rulers. Machiavelli challenges us to examine our own responses to authority, ambition, and ethical dilemmas. How do we balance ideals with practical needs? How do we respond to fortune, risk, and opportunity? His insights apply as much to personal decision-making as to statecraft. Finally, the lecture closes not with definitive answers, but with an invitation. Machiavelli leaves us questioning, observing, and analyzing. The study of power, human behavior, and political life is ongoing. His work endures because it challenges assumptions, provokes thought, and demands engagement. We are left with curiosity, reflection, and the awareness that leadership, morality, and human nature are complex and intertwined. The questions he raises are as relevant today as they were 5 centuries ago. The task is to keep questioning, keep observing, and keep learning from the playbook he left behind.